Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U here to talk about the 13th ranked Miami Hurricanes winning 34-17 over Virginia Tech, improving to 9-2 overall. Also, I waited to do this video because I wanted to watch the Georgia Tech Pittsburgh game, so I'll provide some thoughts on that leading into Miami's regular season finale at Pittsburgh next weekend. So we can talk about that as well as the other games that happened today across college football. But first off, with this game, look, Miami controlled it from the beginning, and I think that was important to do. It did look a little dicey there in the second half, but just starting off, with how Miami played early on, really good. This is what you want a team like Miami to do in a game like this: get out to an early lead. And Miami led 14-3 after the first two possessions, a couple passing touchdowns by Carson Beck, kind of moved up and down the field. And I was really interested to see how the offense was going to look because of that first drive. They moved Malachi Tony around quite a bit, which I found to be interesting and a lot of fun to watch. We've seen kind of Malachi have a great freshman year, and then now we're starting to see him do a little bit more. I think Shannon Dawson's really enjoying, being able to put Malachi in different situations. And typically with a wide receiver like Malachi, yes, you want to get some pop passes like you saw today, some jet sweep stuff, get the ball in his hands on some reverses, maybe some carries. And you do see that with players that have the skill set like Malachi. But for the third game in a row, he's throwing a pass and completing a pass. And I just think that element is so unique to a guy, and to be able to do all three. And that's what he did today. Threw a pass, completed one, also had the carries there, and then also the huge day, his biggest game yet, season high, 146 yards on 12 receptions, 15 targets, and 16 total touches, and just a huge part of this offense. The biggest weapon that Miami has is Malachi. There's no doubt about it, and he's making plays. And also, there were some catches in there that, look, those jet sweeps are one thing, and that did pad his stats a little bit because those could have just been carries. But because of how it works, the pass actually comes forward from Carson, in case you're curious. But I was really impressed with the over the middle catch that he had. There were some catches that he had to really stretch out and really go get. And I thought he was great. We talk about his foot speed. It's easy to see his foot speed, acceleration, in and out of his breaks, on his cuts, but just his catch radius, and for him to adjust his body, and go get the balls with some contested catches in there. I think that's almost an underrated part of his game. I think that's a part of his game that can actually continue to get better. Will continue to improve as he just gains more experience and gets older, and just kind of just keeps it moving, in addition to all the other things that he does with the ball in his hand. So it was fun to watch. Malachi, huge day, a huge performance. And certainly, Carson Beck, and I touched on the pop passes there, but 27-32, goes for 320, gets that 20-yard touchdown right at the end. Mario Cristobal decides to go for it there on fourth down, go for the end zone, 20-yard touchdown with 20 seconds left to Malachi. Malachi jump ball and one-on-one coverage, and he goes and gets a touchdown. But Carson, a huge day from him. And I think that's what you kind of see with Carson, is just his, the accuracy there. He's delivering the ball, not bad plays, wasn't sacked, didn't have a turnover. So I think all in all, just a really good performance by Carson, delivering the ball, not just to Malachi, but, Keelan Marion. And Keelan, another good game from him. 6 catches, 79 yards, has really stepped up with CJ Daniels dealing with an injury. And certainly Keelan's taking advantage of his opportunities, really helping out Carson, looking explosive, making plays. 368 yards over his last 4 games, coming down the stretch here, really strong. And what stands out to me, not just the yards are adding up, but his yards per catch is much different now than it was at the beginning of the year. So right now, over those last 4 games, 17 and a half yards per catch, which is what you want to see from an outside receiver, absolutely, especially a guy with speed like Keelan has. Whereas those first 7 games, he was under 10 yards a catch. And I think that has been a huge difference from him. He's making big plays, getting downfield more, certainly very active, and they need him to come on strong even more with that big game next week against Pittsburgh, as Miami looks to stay in contention for the ACC title game as well as a college football playoff. And then defensively, look, absolutely, the defense gave up way too many rushing yards. A season high 194 yards, over 5 yards per carry, giving up some big long gains in there, and just bad angles from different players there in that back seven. Linebackers, I thought the defensive backs as well. Got to tighten that up, certainly against Pittsburgh, but also whatever happens after the Pittsburgh game, depending on Miami's opponent and how everything shakes out. But, you don't want that. It's very difficult to have a good defensive performance when you don't stop the run. Virginia Tech struggled so much passing the ball, although they did make it a little close there in the fourth quarter, getting that touchdown, the onside kick. But regardless, Miami was able to pull away. Defensively, also, I do want to point out, I thought it was good. 9 tackles for loss as a defense. And shout out to Ahmad Moten, had 3 of those with 2 sacks. Justin Scott had 2.5 tackles for loss. And those are 2 guys that really stepped up. David Blaze been out, and then just a lot of attention, obviously, on Bain and Mesidor. But those 2 guys on the interior doing a good job of creating some plays there. So that was a good sign. I like what I saw from there. And then the pass defense, again, pretty good. Drones had a hard time getting anything going in the passing game for the most part. There were some big plays in there that they gave up, but overall, defensively just solid. And really, that was my biggest takeaway from the offensive performance today. And I think that's just kind of how I sum everything up. I just thought it was a solid win. It wasn't a huge game. They didn't put up huge numbers. It wasn't just dominating in terms of points and total yards, but it was a pretty clean game. Miami was in complete control. A lot would have had to have happened there in the fourth quarter for Virginia Tech to mount that comeback, but Miami held on and got the win. Again, 9-2 and 5-2 in the ACC. So at 5-2, Miami is tied for 5th in the ACC following the Pittsburgh Georgia Tech game, as Pittsburgh won a big one, 42-28, goes up 28-0. Georgia Tech kind of fights back, couldn't get the stop they needed there in the fourth quarter to, try to tie the game. A ridiculous fake punt call there by Pat Narduzzi there in the fourth quarter when you had the game in complete control, and then he gave up a short field. It didn't make any sense, but Pittsburgh holds on. And I think Pittsburgh is certainly going to be a tough opponent. I thought that I've been watching them all year long. I remember when Mason first got in there, Heitzel got their quarterback, and just when he stepped in and how he looked, and it's like, okay, this guy's got something, and it's just been continued to kind of grow from there. And I thought he had another good game. He certainly outperformed Haynes King in this one, and Haynes was looking like he would be the ACC Player of the Year, still in contention for it, but Mason outplayed him, and certainly Miami has to be aware of that going into the game and on the road. And Pat Narduzzi, he knows what it takes to win. He's won an ACC title before. So Carson's got to be on top of his game. And I thought the Pittsburgh defense was really tough. I think they made things certainly very difficult for Haynes and the offense there. Georgia Tech had been really rolling offensively, number 1 team in the country in yards per game. And the Pitt defense just did a really good job. They're really doing a good job of creating tackles for losses and applying pressure. These are some of the things that have affected Miami throughout the year. So the offensive line is going to be big in this one. But just this game. So with Pittsburgh winning, they are still in contention. These teams are still in contention, holding out hope that they can be one of the 2 spots. There's no spot that's been clinched as of yet, as of this weekend, so everything's going into the final weekend, 2 spots still available. The 2 teams that are in the driver's seat are Virginia and SMU, both at 6-1. So they'll get a chance to go ahead and close that out. Favorable matchups there for them, and Miami certainly needs them to lose as the teams behind them. Pittsburgh at 6-1 as well. They'll need those teams to lose also. Both spots for the ACC title game are still open as of this weekend. So going into the final weekend, a lot to play for, but Virginia and SMU are in the driver's seat. If each of them win their games in the final weekend, they will clinch a spot. So Virginia and SMU both at 6-1. Virginia plays Virginia Tech, and then SMU plays Cal. So certainly favorable matchups for both of them, and they have chances to clinch it there and go to Charlotte. So that would obviously be very disappointing for Miami. they've had a slim hope of getting in there, and certainly it still is that way. Pittsburgh at 6-1 is holding out hope as well. So this game is very meaningful for them. They need to beat Miami and then hope one of those two teams lose. And then Georgia Tech sitting at 6-2, they're done with their schedule. And then also Duke at 5-2. Those are the teams still in slight contention right now. I think with tiebreakers, maybe we'll see how it shakes out. What if every team goes 6-2? So certainly a very interesting situation going on in the ACC. But look, it is what it is for Miami. Disappointing. It doesn't look like they're going to be in Charlotte. I thought that was definitely, obviously, the way it looks right now, but the easiest path in terms of the most clear path to get into the college football playoffs. You got to win your conference, and Miami doesn't look like they're even going to play for it. So that's very disappointing, and that'll be something that has to be a huge focal point for 2026. Miami has to get to the ACC title game, especially if the college football playoff appearance does not work out for them this year. A lot's going to just go back to the ACC, and you've got to be able to win your conference. That's the biggest way, the easiest way, the most clear path way to the college football playoff, and that has to be a huge point of emphasis moving forward for the Miami Hurricanes program. And then with the college football playoffs, I just want to provide a little bit of my thoughts about where Miami stands and the rankings that have been coming out each week, and then also provide maybe just a little bit of a different way of looking at things that might help out people really diving into everything. Look, each and every week that the rankings have come out, I've not been that focused on it because that only matters a little bit. And I think it's really been discussed quite a bit in terms of that actual moment in time. But to me, that's not that big of a deal. It's about what happens at the end when the rankings get fully released. And I say that because when I looked at, at the very beginning, you could look at some of the teams in contention, and I was really paying attention to their schedule down the road. And when you look at some of these teams either ahead of Miami or behind Miami had really good opportunities to either boost their resume or have their resume get knocked down. So I wasn't getting too worked up about where everything was lining up, and even now, just with certain teams with the weekly rankings that come out. What I was doing, and maybe this is something to pay attention to, like I said, I've been paying attention to schedules, future schedules, how it could look, and it's going to work itself out. But the way I've been looking at it and really processing the rankings is, and how things have gone, and the way I see it is, I've been looking at almost like conference hierarchy, and whatever team it is in that spot, that's how it's going to be, regardless of really what team it actually is. For example, I think the SEC is going to get at least 4 teams in. I think that's a lock. So take 4 of those spots to the SEC. And again, it will shake itself out as to you can guess or predict which teams will have those 4 spots, but I think they're going to get 4 in. That, to me, that's the biggest thing to pay attention to. I think the Big Ten is going to get at least 3 teams in. I think the Big 12 with 1, the ACC with 1, and then the American Conference with 1 as well. That's 10 spots right there. That's how I'm looking at it. And the way that Notre Dame's being ranked, that looks like a number 11. So the way I'm looking at it with Miami, I think they're in a group with, will the SEC the number 5 team, or will the Big 10 the 4th best team, or the Big 12 second, the ACC second. That's where I think Miami falls into place if they're not going to be compared to Notre Dame, which makes things a little bit difficult because they are not in a conference. But certainly with where they're ranked right now, they look like they're going to have one of those spots. So it looks like it is 11 spots allotted for, and then 1 team, whether, like I said, what conference it's going to come from. And Miami's certainly hoping to be in that mix, in that discussion. And that's the way I would look at it. And I know, for example, the Big 12, are they going to get 2 teams in? It's not necessarily, they have 3 teams ranked ahead of Miami. I think, are they going to get that second team? Because Miami's not going to be the only team as it looks right now on the outside looking in. I think that's the big thing to pay attention to. So I think that's the thing that I'm paying attention to is by conferences, how many teams per conference are going to get in, and then with the conference title games and the remaining schedule. Again, I think it will play itself out. I really don't see the SEC only get 3 teams. I don't see the Big Ten only getting 2 in, So, and then the other ones were essentially, or they are guaranteed. So that's the way I'm looking at it. So if you just take 10 spots off the board, right from the jump, I think that really can help, determine, where those final two spots are going to come from. Again, that's just another way of looking at this college football playoff stuff. I really disagree with style points. I don't think Miami has to do that, so to speak. I just think it is what it is at this point, and they've got to win, obviously, and look good doing it. But an extra touchdown here or there, that late touchdown at the end of the game, to me, that's not going to make any difference. These games are on TV. Everybody can watch what happens. You're not submitting a score, and you're not sneaking in a touchdown there extra. It all matters. Everybody's paying attention to how the game goes. So I don't think that's going to make or break Miami. I don't think one touchdown will on a situation like that. So we'll see how everything shakes out. But really, I think what makes it really difficult for Miami is they're not going to have that extra, as the committee's been saying, this extra data point. They're not going to be able to play in their conference title game where other teams will be. So Miami needs a lot of teams to, I think, need a lot of teams to kind of just drop off and kind of fall back. So we'll see how it plays out. Drop in the comments below. A lot to talk about. Let me know what you thought about the game. Were you hoping to see more? Were you encouraged? Happy? It's 3 straight wins for the Hurricanes. They're still in contention. And then your thoughts on the ACC. I do want to make note of this. I just got an email, but for people that don't know, Virginia and NC State played each other early in the season, but it was actually a non-conference game. So if you're confused when you're looking at schedules, yes, it was a non-conference game because they wanted to play each other and they weren't going to do that in the AC schedule. So just making a note of that because, again, I just got an email about that. And then also, too, drop in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the college football playoffs. Do you think Miami should be in it? Are you concerned they won't be? Do you think they deserve to be? I guess is a big question to ask. And that is a lot to discuss with that. And just ultimately, with what we're talking about, it's very disappointing to see Miami in this situation, trying to fight for the final spot. As I mentioned earlier, if they got to the ACC title game, you have a chance to win your conference. That's a path. And certainly, anytime you lose more than one game, you put yourself at risk of not being able to be included in the college football playoffs. It just is what it is. So thanks for watching. Have a good rest of the weekend and take care.